Yeah, so hello everyone. Basically, this is has been a topic that's been on my mind for a long time, and Matt and I have chatted about it for a while and talked about like the outdoor camp and everything. But just to before I get to the relevance to Kujan education, I just wanted to talk about the therapeutic effects that nature has. It's becoming like a leading school of psychotherapy. So for this presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about background of it, how nature therapy is beneficial, also some problems that come with it, and how we can integrate it into education. So some background first. Nature therapy is basically the same thing as ecotherapy, and it just entails exposing yourself to nature, like putting somebody in a natural setting, whether it be in the woods, a beach, or even in camping outside. And the implications of this are that it improves mental, physical, and even spiritual health. And I'm going to be talking a lot about spiritual health through this. It's not going to be in like a hippie sense, but genuinely evidence-based medicine that enhances your spiritual well-being, because it is a dimension of health. So this is a long list, but these are some types of nature therapy. Forestry or forest bathing. It actually started in Japan in 1990. It's called Shinrin-yoku, and it literally means forest bathing. You walk in the forest and you just take in everything, all the trees and everything. There's horticulture. We work together to cultivate a garden. If you're in the city, maybe something as simple as going to a park can count as ecotherapy. Nature-based sports like rock climbing, skiing, kayaking, and surfing. Notice that these are all different natural settings: mountains, snow, rivers, and beaches. Animal therapy, of course, if you're a dog person or you want to pet things. There's also outdoor meditation and yoga and hunting, hiking, and then there's this newer concept called grounding or earthing, which is sounds kind of surreal, but it's like feeling physically connected to the Earth's electromagnetic connection. I don't know how far that's true, but an example is these like toe shoes that are more available in the market nowadays. So why is it a problem? Well, there's increasing urbanization and industrialization all around the world. Over 50% of people of humanity live in cities, and 90% of people spend 90% of people in the developed world spend their time indoors, which is like a significant amount of time. And the more developed the world gets, the more time we'll spend indoors. And scientists are beginning to suspect that a lot of the modern ailments, especially mental ailments like increasing rates of depression, suicide, etc., come from this, and social isolation as well, come from this increased emphasis on spending time indoors. And it's also, this is kind of a aside, but it's ironic that nature is also becoming a luxury good, because those who are poorest end up being in cities who have the least access to nature. And this is like another problem that should be solved. And there's some caveats with all this talk about improving development and urbanization, because with that comes the loss of nature and a lot of health losses that we'll see, that I'll talk about in a second. So, yeah, and then the problem has been phrased like a nature deficit disorder, like an actual condition, and people have dubbed nature exposure as providing vitamin G, N, or W, vitamin green, nature, or wilderness. So it's like a cool new thing. So now we'll talk about some of the actual benefits with nature and the problems that can come with an uneducated approach to it. So this little quote from a Swiss physician from the 1500s: "The art of healing comes from nature, not the physician." And I do believe that's true, but it's a combination of the two. Does anyone want to pitch in and tell me why they think nature therapy is so beneficial?
We were always meant to be outside, I guess. It's only recently that we've been in offices and stuff like that.
Totally, absolutely. I don't know who that was, but I completely agree. Like, it was not in our favor evolutionarily millions of years ago to prefer spending all our times inside caves and being afraid of going into the woods for camping, because if we were afraid, that wouldn't be conducive for our survival. So it's definitely an evolutionary argument for that. That's just a broad overview and background. So just just a little caveat again, I just read a whole bunch of scientific papers and some articles and distilled the findings from them. I can show you guys the papers and evidence later, but I'm afraid you're going to have to take it at face value for the sake of time. So some of the hormonal benefits of nature is that it increases good feeling hormones like serotonin and dopamine, associated with pleasure and happiness, and it decreases stress-related hormones like cortisol and epinephrine or adrenaline, and those that goes a long way. And this can come from something as simple as taking a 5-minute walk in the woods at the end of the day or something like that. But again, not all people have access to this. Physiological benefits are actually mind-boggling. The more I read about this, the more awesome it seemed to me. It increases the rates of recovery from injury. It increases your pain threshold. It can help with the synchronization of your sleep-wake cycle and help with problems like insomnia or the opposite, narcolepsy. So again, these are all some of these are anecdotal, and there's rudimentary evidence on this, but I think there is enough to warrant our attention. It also decreases rates of heart rate and blood pressure, decreases rates of cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, asthma, nearsightedness, hospitalization, and overall. Sorry, it's a typo. I meant to say mortality, not morality. But psychological benefits, as I mentioned before, it can drive down rates of depression, anxiety, even ADHD, stress levels, suicide, alcohol, and drug addiction. So nature therapy is a popular alternative to pharmacological interventions, like just giving drugs. And this is the spiritual one. Take it with a grain of salt, but I do believe in it. I think exposure to nature can lead people to have higher levels of self-awareness, less agitation, higher self-transcendence, and even higher human performance. Like this guy up in the top right, that's Wim Hof, popularized for running marathons barefoot and patenting a breathing technique. Another dimension of health that people don't pay a lot of attention to is your actual breathing, like physical health, emotional health, or mental, and breathing. Breathing is actually quite important. And exposure to nature takes you to this flow state, which is an optimal state of psychological experience, which is what a lot of athletes and artists seek. And this type 2 fun is basically doing something grueling, like running an ultra marathon. It's not fun in the state, but afterwards you realize retrospectively that it gives you a lot of mental clarity and benefits. So keep that in mind. Flow state, nature as engendering the flow state as for something that can help with education later on. Again, there's some potential problems if we don't approach this right. If nature therapy is seen as something hip and something we just do just without fully appreciating it, it becomes something we do for the dose instead of cultivating a relationship with nature. For example, breast milk. We try to create all these alternative formulas to try to replicate mother's breast milk, but no matter how many variations we try, it never actually captures or can emulate true breast milk. Similarly, we can't just substitute nature with plants inside our home or changing our wallpaper on our laptop screen, which is the next problem. Like technological substitution is not necessarily enough, but if those are the limited resources we have, it might be our best option. And this is an interesting distinction I found between existing and engaging. Like people who just walked around in nature experienced self-reported levels of increased calmness and peacefulness, but people who engaged with it, like insofar as hiking or grueling, doing activities that were grueling or rock climbing, they reported levels of higher self-awareness and transcendence, those higher cognitive states that we desperately seek. And I think this is also relevant to education, this subtle but important distinction. So there's another really important part about nature therapy is that there's a community component. A lot of the therapy processes happen in groups, and the social component is also something that's evolutionary grounded and helps foster a lot of the aforementioned health benefits. But also nature is also beneficial if you just go there alone. but I think solitude in nature should be considered a next step because not all people are necessarily equipped to immediately reap the benefits of nature by themselves. They need to have some background before they jump in and are left in the woods all alone, you know. So now the moment you've all been waiting for, integrating with Cooge. So, I mean, just considering all the benefits that nature gives to people who need help, like just imagine how much it can help improve people who are already at a stable baseline, or for example, or kids who are really impressionable. So just a little build up. There's one type of education system called experiential education, and it's a heuristic method that values cooperative learning, and the students learn by being exposed to a certain learning environment. An example could be if you're in a biology class, instead of just learning from lecture, you go into the biology lab and cultivate E. coli on plate agars or something. And this is its own topic, but this is an increasingly popular form of pedagogy that's being implemented around the world, as opposed to things like rote memorization or rote learning, especially in Asian countries. So just a little sentence, a little hypothesis. I think that the most instructive form of experiential learning is nature ecotherapy based, because experiential learning doesn't necessarily have to be nature based. It can be, it can be occur completely indoors or in the classroom. But I think nature is the most important for the reasons I mentioned before. It can engender a flow state, which if you guys all know Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours to perfection. What people don't know is that the 10,000 hours can be halved if those hours of practice occur in the flow state. Not even halved, it can be quartered. So the flow state is something that really harnesses the brain's fullest capacity. And if nature exposure allows you to get to the flow state, I think that's the perfect condition, optimal condition to teach children who are learning. It's also cooperative. Like I said before, there's social elements. And yeah, I'll get more about that later. But 4 examples of how we could learn, how we could implement teaching, like Cooge's Colorado program with Brian, and new biology-based camps and things like that. One example is adventure and wilderness education. An important part about this is that there's a risk exposure. Like there should be stakes involved. I'm just going to show a quick video for like 10 seconds. Right. So you saw that it was cooperative. All the kids are working together to solve problems. It doesn't necessarily have to be remedial. Like this can be applicable to students, and any student. But the risk element is important because if there are no stakes, there's like a whole psychological thing with allostatic load and Yerkes-Dodson law, where a certain level of stress is conducive to learning. Too much is too bad. Too little doesn't let you grow at all. So that risk is really important in nature, and it comes with being in nature because it steps you out of your comfort zone as well. Another example is just playing sports in nature. You can combine cooperation and competition together. It's called co-opetition. The stakes are still there. Also, another thing that I talked about in a previous presentation, I know I'm running out of time, sorry. Social behavioral skills are more predictive of success than like cognitive skills or test scores. And like sports in nature or adventure education is something that will impart these social behavioral skills, such as learning how to work in groups, self-confidence, problem solving, rational thinking, critical thinking, all these things. And those in the long term are much more predictive of success, such as longevity, higher income, life satisfaction, happiness, likelihood that you'll be in a stable marriage. All these things are related to social behavioral skills. Yet another example is geocaching. I know that with the world being increasingly technologized, we can't just completely do away with technology. So why not integrate it? And geocaching is a popular activity that's been around for a while. You just use GPS coordinates to find hidden objects in nature. You know, it's fun. It's like a scavenger hunt. You work with others. It's like solving a puzzle. And yeah, it's cool. I highly recommend that. And just a little fourth example, you can integrate your curriculum in school with nature that's available to you. Can anyone think of any examples if they've experienced this in their own school system, or what they would do if they were teaching?
One time in high school, I remember going on a hike in the woods near our school, and the teacher, I believe, picked up like a dead squirrel and froze it, and we examined it later.
Yeah, no, totally awesome. I'm hoping that was a memorable experience for you, Glenn, because you know it was much better than reading about squirrel anatomy in a textbook or something. But yeah, I'm also just thinking of Matt Tatsuya's example, where he took his Japanese students to the river and actually worked with them to change the flows, and actually grew cockroaches. So, you know, these are all many examples of integrating with the curriculum. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with biology either. I haven't given that much thought, but I'm sure we can do it with things like philosophy and English too. Philosophy, sorry, this is a complete tangent, but philosophy historically has been done while people were walking. Like Aristotle and Nietzsche were famous for taking long walks while thinking. So again, this is all an exposure to nature. That's where some of their greatest insights came from. So obviously there are problems with this too, or limitations, I should say. How can we achieve nature-based experiential learning in really extreme weather regions or during periods of isolation? So can anyone think of any examples off the top of their heads? That's a hard question. Very relevant.
I'm thinking in hot
Especially-
regions, you could possibly do some like work after sundown, or specifically like get together to like see some of the differences that happens in the landscape and the like animals and plants that change at dark. I think in elementary school we were always taken out for like owl walks at night every year to try to go see or hear owls. So I think about that sometimes.
Well, that's awesome. I wish I did that in elementary school. But yeah, no, absolutely, Elena. Yeah, just waiting for the temperature to become more bearable after sundown, for example.
But
And even
also,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say also, I mean, there are communities that live in extremely hot and extremely cold regions anyways, and that's a perfect learning opportunity to take their practices and learn from that. So I feel like it's possible. It just sounds intimidating.
Totally. Yeah, this picture in the middle is actually from, I think, children in Siberia, just hanging out outside. So it's totally possible. And even during periods of social isolation, one of our most favorite things to do is show our pets, right? So having pets is something therapeutic or cathartic, and working with the animals and wildlife that we have accessible to us, however little that may be, is the best thing that we can do. And I think cities and urban planners in the future should focus not so much on just trying to substitute or mimic nature, but like reproducing it to its fullest extent. And you know, there's a lot more caveats to this that I haven't even begun to cover. Like, for example, people interestingly prefer natural open spaces as opposed to forests, because early humans were most of them evolved in savannas instead of forests. So forests provide a component of fear and activate the amygdala, whereas open spaces don't. So this is like another argument against planting trees and leaving open spaces. But you know, you have to take all these into consideration. Yeah, but ultimately, it's all the more reason to protect our planet, or learn to do it right, learn to cultivate it and reproduce it right in other places, wherever we may go. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Good job. That was super informative. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I think I'm lagging.
No, I was just going to say, I don't have to say this to Krishi because we've already talked about this between each other, but just for everyone else. And like, this is a big passion of mine as well. And obviously with Elena and Kelly here, actually, because they both created camps that we want to create as well as our kind of one-off new camps. Elena's got an art one, and Kelly had one. Actually, I think he had multiple, Kelly. But obviously, Krishi was just talking about. We're just talking about finally implementing an environmental camp, and I wanted to say, Krishi, since you already know about my passion for it, the way you presented it was really awesome and much better than I have created. Because I don't think you knew this, but I created a lounge about nature therapy.
Oh, whoa!
And it's like, I was watching yours. I was like, oh my God, this is way better than what I created to use. For you guys, you know, we have the English lounge thing going on with like the weekend. It's kind of topics about that. So thank you for explaining that better. And it was more inspiring. I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
Appreciate it.
And hopefully we'll be doing that environmental camp too. I mean, yeah, Krishi mentioned, we just literally had a meeting about it last night. So it's really cool to see that. Thanks. And I have a question, but I'm going to hold until after everyone else, if anyone else has questions too.
What is your favorite form of ecotherapy?
I love sports, so I'd love to do like rock climbing and stuff. Also, I'm in North Carolina right now, actually, just in the woods. So just climbing up waterfalls and getting lost there. So Shinjuku, the Japanese one for forest bathing. Thank you for the question.
I'm a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. Oh, I was just wondering, what states in America or other countries care most about nature therapy from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And other Americans here, please feel free to help me out. But I think it's definitely states that have access to nature. Like I'm thinking immediately West Coast, Colorado, Montana, states without, states that just have access to nature. New York and the Midwest, it's very suburban and there's a lot of cities there. Not to say the West doesn't have cities, but they just have salvaged the nature that still exists there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Krishi. I just got to hop in for a second.
Sorry,
You just went.
Go ahead, Elena. My fault.
The East Coast is incredible as well. There's a lot of chances to see different, like if you're interested in oceans or the like inlets and how the ocean meets with like rivers and moves into the country. The East Coast is really great for that, especially the Southeast. There's a ton of like little islands and barrier islands, which are really cool, as well as there's an incredible mountain range that Krishi's actually in, the Appalachians, which span the East Coast, which are a beautiful, incredible hiking place.
My fault, Elena. Basically, the Midwest sucks.
Go to North Carolina, and then you can make a better nature therapy presentation.
You're right. It's not like I'm there right now.
Okay, so I'll ask my question. I don't want it. I know this question, maybe I don't want it to turn into a big discussion, but like Krishi, you were saying with the curriculum, and you guys had some good ideas jumping in, and like I would, for a while, write poetry in nature. It just felt right. It just felt connected, and all these different things. But one thing I've started doing, and I kind of feel a bit weird about it, and I was wondering your opinion, and of course anyone else, but I have these two gardens near me within like 5-10 minute drive, and so I'm a membership. I love going to gardens. I do forest bathing. I obviously, Krishi, we kind of have these same interests, but so I spend a lot of time there to stress relief, maybe a walk during lunch between working at the distillery and starting Japan work. It's really nice. I feel really grateful to have this. But what I've started doing, and maybe, I don't know if I've had a meeting with anyone here, maybe Gwen, I've started to work at the gardens as well. I brought my laptop and go find a hidden corner, maybe amongst the plumerias or something, But I'm like, what do you think about that? Is that weird to mix that? Because I'm like, I'm obviously, no, and I never see anyone else doing this. But I'm obviously like, I'm bringing my work into this like stress-free zone, but I do feel better doing it, right? I feel like I have the sun rays on me. I just feel better. But since I'm so busy, I kind of have started to, and I'll still walk around. I'll still do my thing, but I'll work there as well. So I'll be there like all day working sometimes, and I'm walking. What do you think about that? Is that bad? Is that what?
Well, as you can see in the chat, I think that's absolutely awesome. And I can cite a study that I read when researching this. Like they took some students or I don't know, some people, I don't know the exact constraints, but they exposed them to like changing their wallpaper and putting on their laptops and putting plants inside. And the other group was outside. And I don't know if it was actually doing work or maybe just staying there, but no amount of indoor nature could substitute what was outdoors. So even if you're not directly engaging with it, I think the secondary spillover effects of just being in nature, your brain picks up so much things subconsciously. So I think absolutely there should be a benefit there. I don't think you'll like ruin it or condition yourself to associate nature with work and then forever hate it. I think that's unlikely.
Thank you. And I feel better. We can keep doing it.
I was a little bit curious about if you saw anything about through hikers in the effects of like nature on mental health and physical health, because they're like constantly in nature for sometimes months at a time. So I was very curious about that.
Like to see if they have better health outcomes than people who spend less time in nature.
Yeah, or just generally like if the health effects increase by a significant amount if you just stay outside for months straight without going inside at all. I don't know if a tent counts as inside, but yeah.
No, that's a good question. Like, I don't know if there's any conclusive evidence, but I'm sure that there would be a lot of benefits. It's just there hasn't been such a longitudinal study, I don't think, for that. And there's just so many variations. Like, do you vary the amount of the frequency with which people go into nature? Do you vary the duration that they go into nature? You know, there's so many different variables. But yeah, I think just putting together all these different studies, there would definitely be